I repaid him with my body, volunteering to become a kept woman for a Manhattan billionaire. His arranged fiancée returned from London just as the 3-year contract expired. After one last romantic night together, I boarded the flight to Monterey, only to run into him again in the first-class cabin, on a business trip. Then I bumped into him again at an antique bookstore in Monterey, browsing for rare editions. Later, paparazzi snapped a photo of my growing pregnancy. Rumors swirled through the elite social circles, claiming I was using the baby to claw my way into the Hawthorne dynasty. His fiancée found me without batting an eyelash and handed over a check. The deal is complete. This is the payment we agreed on. Before we continue, please subscribe to this channel and comment to let us know where you're listening from. 1. I had agreed to be Adrian's kept woman for 3 years, and tonight was the final night. For the first time I stepped out of the bathroom in nothing but a sheer silk slip. Adrian sat on the sofa, expression unreadable as he watched the evening news. I walked toward him slowly, gently plucking the remote from his fingers. I bent down and kissed him, hot and urgent. While tugging at his tie, I pulled him to his feet. He scooped me up in one motion and carried me back to the bathroom. The sound of running water tangled with our ragged breathing, the air thick with lust. A low groan tore from his throat, veins pulsing at his temples. His palm pinned my rocking hips as he rasped, "You look exquisite tonight." Words failed me. I could only whimper against his chest. Like a reef battered by relentless waves, I was submerged again and again. When he finally carried me to bed, my eyes were unfocused, limbs limp against him, damp hair stuck to my cheeks, tear tracks glistening at the corners of my eyes. Adrian blow-dried my hair, then laid us down and pulled me close. It had been half a month since he'd last spent the night. Thinking of tomorrow's departure, I whispered my goodbye. "Thank you for remembering today marks the end of the 3 years. A tear landed squarely over his heart. The hand at my waist stiffened for a heartbeat, then relaxed. A long silence. At last he asked, voice flat, "Where to?" In the past I'd always reported every itinerary in detail. Half a year into the arrangement, I'd sensed how insecure he could be. To give him peace of mind, I'd laid my entire life open, no secrets, no locked doors. My phone passcode was his birthday, every app login was the pinion of his name. If he wished, he could inspect everything at any moment. But this time I only said, "I'm visiting Rachel." I didn't mention the city, nor that I'd already landed a job. I'd be lying if I claimed I hadn't hoped he'd press for more. Several moments passed. The steady rhythm of his breathing drifted from behind me, so he truly didn't care. Lucky for me, I hadn't expected much. He owed me nothing. These 3 years had been my own proposition. Back then I was a freshman when Eleanor was rushed to the ICU with no way to pay. In desperation I noticed the charity footing her bills was his. He had merely come to campus for a guest lecture. I threw myself in front of his town car, and offered myself as his kept woman for 3 years. 2. Just as I thought he'd fallen asleep, he sat up. "Hungry? I'll make you something." I scrambled off the mattress, but he stopped me. "Not hungry. Just grabbing water." "Let me," I blurted, too fast, too loud. After 3 years I could read every flicker across his face. Right now, though his features were calm, I caught the suspicion glinting in his eyes. I lowered my lashes and stayed put. There was nothing suspicious in the fridge, only the bottled water he liked and a lot of empty shelves. In fact, every trace of me had already been erased. His hand hesitated on the door, a tiny frown forming, but he said nothing. We slid back under the covers. As always, he liked to spoon me from behind. Drowsy, I suddenly heard 4 quiet words, "Stay." Nothing more, no emotion. As casually as asking what's for dinner. Pure polite routine. I had never planned to remain someone's caged songbird forever. The past 3 years were repayment, and love. But I had exhausted every ounce of strength and trick. He still hadn't felt anything deeper than owner and possession. Time to leave. I'd collected my diploma last month, and with Rachel's help secured a job I actually wanted. I only had to show up. Those 4 words are enough. Tears spilled the instant I finished, racing into the curve of his shoulder. I wiped them away and forced a light tone. "You came tonight, so my genuine feelings weren't wasted. I heard she's back, perfect timing. Wishing you both an heir soon." 3. When daylight came, Adrian was gone. He's always swamped. I left the key on the coffee table and gave the apartment one last look. I swallowed the ache, shut the door, and headed for JFK. The cityscape scrolled past the cab window, then vanished. Just like what little we'd shared. While I waited at the gate, Rachel called. "You actually broke up with him?" I laughed it off. "We were never a real couple, more like a contract that expired." Rachel sighed theatrically. 3 years of turning crush into reality, and you still couldn't crack his heart. Good riddance. Plenty of fish down under, and Aussie guys are hot. Hurry up, your treat, I chuckled. Deal. You're paying. The banter chased away some of the blues. At boarding, the attendant informed me I'd been upgraded. Why? A passenger requested it. I knew at once, Adrian. Always generous. During our time together he wired 100 grand every month. Holidays meant flowers, crystal flutes of champagne, boxes of jewelry. When work allowed, we vacationed abroad, galleries, boutiques, 5-star suites. The perfect benefactor. And he still remembered to bump me to first class. I'd simply wanted too much. His heart. His fiancée was home. A clean break was the only dignity we had left. 4. The first-class cabin was empty. The attendant said I could pick any seat. I'd flown up front with Adrian before, but never had the whole cabin to myself. I chose the closest pod and stretched out. Broken sleep and restless dreams had worn me thin. I needed a nap. I don't know how long I slept before voices drifted in. Hadn't they said I was alone? I pried my eyes open and slid the door back. Next to me, a steward was pouring crimson into a crystal flute for Adrian. Why was he in the neighboring seat? You're awake, he said evenly. Drink? 3 years of habit had me nodding before I thought. I never refused him anything. It wasn't until the crystal flute was in my hand that I finally realized, he and I were already over. I set the crystal flute down in silence. You don't like this vintage? I shook my head. I don't like red wine. Adrian's brows drew together faintly, then smoothed again, as if the question had never crossed his mind. He had always worn his feelings beneath an unreadable surface. Still, I volunteered an explanation. The truth is, I've never liked alcohol of any kind. Whatever the label, whatever the year, all I taste is heat and bitterness, never any fruit. Why didn't you say so before? For once, he actually pressed for an answer. I gave a small smile and told him the plain truth, because I didn't want to refuse you. I didn't want to spoil your mood. Maybe it was that follow-up question that gave me the courage to ask one of my own. Did you charter the first-class cabin? Yes. No hesitation. My spine snapped straight, my heart lurched into a gallop. Tremors raced to my fingertips, and the thrill flooded every vein. I clutched the hem of my blouse so hard my knuckles ached, certain the long-awaited light was finally within reach. I softened my voice. Why? Adrian stood motionless. A long moment passed before he lifted his gaze, his Adam's apple sliding once. Business trip to Monterey. After we landed he asked if I wanted a ride. I shook my head gently. No need. Rachel's already here. Take care, Adrian. It was the first time I'd ever said his full name to his face. Before, I hadn't dared. From now on, I would never have the chance. He said nothing for the longest time, shadows gathered in his eyes, layers I couldn't read, and I no longer tried. I turned and walked away. 5. It took me a full month to settle into life and work in Monterey. Back in college I'd done internships, and Adrian had arranged one for me in the strategy department of a friend's firm. However whimsical my proposals, they were approved without question. The smallest success was met with exaggerated praise. Once I botched a joint project and almost cost the company a fortune. Adrian stepped in. He took over the account personally, became my client. By day we conferred over logistics. By night he soothed my nerves in the dark, his breath at my ear. Under his guidance the campaign turned around and triumphed. That victory on my resume is what opened the door to the prestigious offer here in Monterey. If his intended fiancée hadn't flown home, if the gossip pages weren't buzzing that Hawthorne and Lang would seal their merger with a wedding, I might have lingered, addicted to his tenderness. Word was, the Lang heiress had been his childhood playmate. They'd been engaged 6 years. At the time, Lang was still in boarding school abroad. After graduating she'd launched a string of art shows, so the marriage had been postponed again and again. 2 months ago Adrian escorted me to a gala. One of his friends saw me for the first time and joked, "Didn't know you kept a delicate little lily in private. Where'd you dig her up?" Adrian shot him a cold look, saying nothing, until the man raised both hands in surrender. He laughed it off. Protective much? Victoria's tour ends soon, and with that temper of hers, the fireworks will be fun to watch. I've never enjoyed being anyone's spectacle. The day before Victoria flew home, I was already in Monterey. 6. Alex, Rachel, and a few friends took me on a shopping spree. On the way back we passed an antique bookstore. I figured I ought to buy a stack of books, rainy afternoons in a rocker, raindrops drumming against tall windows, a novel in my lap, pure bliss. I pushed through the revolving glass door just as a familiar figure exited. Adrian, still on his business trip. I stepped inside, watched him leave, then saw him re-enter from the other side of the revolving door. Shopping for books? He sounded as casual as the weather. I banked my surprise and kept my voice level. Yes. You too? Yes. Nothing more. Back when we lived under the same roof, we'd seldom talked either. Sometimes it started with a look. Sometimes he would listen while I rambled. Oddly, the only place he was ever chatty was in bed. He cared obsessively about how I felt, asking again and again. Occasionally I'd wonder which of us was the patron and which the servant. We were blocking the entrance. I waved a hand. You just stepped out, you must be done. Oh, not yet. Still missing one. Oh. I blinked. Then, go find what you need. I'll browse. He followed at a polite distance, gaze weightless yet clinging like silk threads. Wherever I wandered, whichever aisle I turned, I met that same look, as though he were forever tracing my steps. 7. Outside the bookstore, Adrian invited me to dinner. The restaurant was beautiful. I slipped off my short black jacket, the cream silk slip beneath turning my skin luminous. Adrian finished carving a steak with languid grace and habitually moved to set the slices before me. I lifted a hand. I've got it, thanks. We ate in quiet, the only music the soft clink of porcelain spoons against soup bowls. When do you fly back? I asked, spooning bisque, eyes lowered. He swallowed, dabbed mouth and fingers with a napkin in unhurried, bred-to-the-bone elegance. Not sure. You? I'm not going back. Our gazes collided, his eyes were dark, unreadable, and the stare sent my heart skittering. I looked away, words tumbling. Half a year ago Eleanor moved to the Coastal Care Center here. I've also found a job. Rachel and her family are here, Mom and I will stay. Adrian said nothing for a long while. His hand, resting at the table's edge, slowly clenched until the knuckles blanched. Storms I couldn't name swirled in his eyes. What's wrong? Nothing. I need a smoke. He left for the cigar lounge. The moment he vanished, the suffocating pressure lifted. I sat there, yesterday's confrontation replaying in my head. The dazzling Lang heiress had pulled strings with my company's CEO and summoned me to a conference room. Her stilettos clicked closer, each tap freezing my blood, until I was biting my lip, ice in my veins. Victoria tapped the agreement on the table with one lacquered fingernail. Miss Sterling, I know you were Adrian's kept woman for 3 years. I don't care whether it was love. As long as you stay quiet after he marries me, I can pretend I see nothing. If you're willing to give me a baby to raise, I'll pay you $10 million for your trouble. If you agree to rent out your womb and produce a child for Adrian and me through IVF, name your price. Adrian had always been generous. The money he'd given me could keep me comfortable for life. I shook my head gently and declined. He and I are finished. Your future has nothing to do with me. She laughed as though I'd told a joke, her lips curling in derision. Is that so? But Adrian just keeps staying in Monterey and refuses to come home, she said with a sneer. Even when Uncle Hawthorne flies into a rage and threatens to strip him of his chairmanship, he doesn't bat an eye. She gave a short, contemptuous laugh. Don't tell me he's actually fallen in love with the scenery over there? I didn't know why Adrian wouldn't return. My knuckles whitened as I forced myself to stay calm. He has his own plans. If Lang wants IVF or some other technological shortcut, she should take it up with him. Victoria's smile curved wider, chillingly bright. How do you know I haven't tried already? Maya, choosing you is a compliment, don't be ungrateful. If I feel like it, I have plenty of energy and methods to make you cooperate, your job, for instance, or the Coastal Care Center where your mother stays. Outside the window the sun was blazing, yet when I met the absolute confidence in her eyes, it felt as if I'd been plunged into an ice cellar. Tremors swept through me from head to foot. My throat seemed stuffed with cotton soaked in water, so tight I couldn't push out a single syllable. 8. Adrian came back after finishing his cigar, and we walked out side by side. It was the first time I'd ever smelled the faint tang of tobacco on him. I'd always thought he didn't smoke. Crossing the lobby, I stopped and dug my nails into my palms. Do you want me to come upstairs with you? We were in the western restaurant of a boutique local hotel. He must be staying on the upper floors. In a foreign land, perhaps he was lonely too. Asking me to dine at his hotel was suggestive enough. If he wished, I wouldn't mind spending another night with him. As for Victoria's proposal that I bear their child, so long as Adrian didn't mention it, I would pretend I'd never heard it. He glanced toward the front desk, voice unreadable. I invited you to dinner. That's all, right? Victoria was probably staying here as well. I'd been presumptuous. I stared at my toes and gave a dry laugh. Then, I'll head back. I'd taken only 2 steps when an arm caught me from behind. I turned to find him looking down at me. His gaze settled on my face, eyes suddenly dark. May I? I had no idea why he'd changed his mind, but I nodded gently. Adrian went to check in. So he hadn't been staying here after all. My cheeks burned. I seemed to have misunderstood. No, apparently he'd misunderstood me too. I fretted at my nails, vexed. How on earth do I explain? 9. When I stepped out of the bathroom, Adrian, already in a bathrobe, was leaning against the headboard, watching the news as though nothing were amiss. For a moment it felt as if we were back in the Manhattan penthouse, indulging without restraint. I lifted the quilt and slipped in. Just now, that wasn't what I meant. I meant, I know, Adrian said softly, laughter in his voice. I want to. So there was no misunderstanding. Relief washed through me. His lips brushed my burning cheek, the damp trail shifting slowly to my mouth. My palms pressed against his chest in mild resistance. A tingling warmth blossomed between my thighs. Instinctively I ducked my head against the hard rise and fall of his torso, my lips grazing his skin. Adrian groaned, eyes narrowing, voice husky. You're free now. Are you sure this is okay? The scorching contact made my breath catch. He lightly licked my earlobe, murmuring in a gentle, coaxing tone, Maya, don't worry about pleasing me. Tonight, just be your real self. I couldn't believe it, my lips trembled. What did you say? He repeated, be your real self. My body went rigid. Adrian stilled, withdrew his hand, and stared at me with burning eyes, his voice rough and terrible. If you don't want this, or if anything feels wrong, you have the right to stop me at any moment. In the dim light I couldn't read his face, I could only sense the naked devotion etched along his brows. I swallowed the storm inside me and, watching him nervously, whispered, then, turn off every light. Adrian dislikes darkness, yet overly bright rooms always make me shy and awkward. During the past 3 years he had always kept one small amber lamp glowing beside the bed. Still wearing that gentle, unruffled expression, he said, all right. He reached out and clicked off the last lamp with a snap. Instantly the room sank into blackness, only faint moonlight outlined the sharp angle of his jaw. The air seemed to freeze. Though he fought for control, I felt his breathing grow heavier. As I'd suspected, he was afraid of the dark, genuinely afraid. It had to be some psychological wound. Let's leave one lamp on, total darkness scares me. I reached to switch a light back on, but Adrian caught my hand. Interlacing our fingers, he squeezed so hard it felt as if he might crush my bones. He was at his breaking point, voice gravelly, don't. Let's try. The corners of his eyes were red, he tilted his head back, dragged in a deep breath, and let his narrow hips settle more firmly. Tears flooded my eyes as a dense tingling rushed from my heart to every nerve, sweeping over me like a towering wave. Next morning I pried my heavy eyelids open, wincing at the sunlight filtering through the curtains. Suddenly the pressure around my neck tightened, a muscular arm circled my throat and waist, clasping me as though terrified I might run. Burrowing his head into the hollow of my neck, he mumbled drowsily, sleep a little longer. His hot breath brushed my skin, feather-light and ticklish. I eased away gently and got up to dress. I met Victoria the day before yesterday. She's beautiful, capable, she suits you well. A flicker of stunned blankness passed through Adrian's gaze, even the air around him seemed to dim with his silence. No matter what she told you, ignore it. My eyes shimmered, I forced the words out in a whisper. Adrian, I know the title of Hawthorne isn't simple, and it isn't for me. Let's end this here. Dark currents swirled in his eyes, heavy and unreadable. Maya, give me a little more time. 10. Adrian still hasn't gone home. Every day he drives me to work and back. On weekends he takes me sightseeing. Everything feels like those calm, leisurely days again. Except when he steps away to answer calls, a faint uneasiness stirs in me. Quinn, he drove me out to the Great Barrier Reef. Only after we arrived did I discover that Mom and Rachel's family were all there. Adrian's smile spread to his eyes. Didn't you say trips are merrier with a crowd? We took a helicopter tour. Looking down was like watching an overturned painter's palette, breathtakingly gorgeous. Over lunch, Rachel and her husband rattled on about the rainbow of fish darting through coral gardens while scuba diving. Mom laughed happily, yet whenever her glance slid between Adrian and me, a shadow of worry crossed her face. She longed to ask about us but didn't know how. Truthfully, neither do I. Several times I started to ask Adrian what his plans were, but the words stuck in my throat. Perhaps if I don't ask, we can simply stay like this forever. After dinner, my sister and brother-in-law took Mom back to the Coastal Care Center, and Adrian drove me to my apartment. 11. He pulled up below the building. I unbuckled and reached for the door, then noticed Adrian hadn't moved. These past days he'd been living at my place. I turned to Adrian in bewilderment. The overhead light was on, softening the sharp planes of his profile as he angled his gaze toward me. Those eyes glittered with an icy light. "So, you're leaving me." The family outing he'd orchestrated today had been nothing but a final farewell. I hadn't meant to cry, but tears surged out of nowhere, beyond my control. Adrian pulled a tissue from the dispenser and dabbed at my cheeks. My nails bit into my palms as I fought the emotions crashing over me, my throat so tight my words came in fractured pieces. "Are you going away?" Adrian said nothing, the depths of his dark eyes were unreadable. I looked out the side window. Pedestrians hurried past, each a stranger to the next. I inhaled deeply, steadied the tears, forced a smile, and turned back to say goodbye. "I understand. I'll head back, then." I reached for the door handle, but the lock clicked shut. "Maya." "Yeah." I kept my back to him, I couldn't bear to look again. "If I can never give you a marriage license, would you still stay with me?" After all this time, he'd finally said it. I twisted around and studied the man I'd fallen for at first sight. That first day, he'd leaned against his car, tall and languid in a tailored suit, face impassive, not a flicker of extra expression. Clusters of female students had whispered whether he was a new professor or someone more important. Half an hour later I saw him again, keynote speaker at the university lecture. When it ended, I dashed out like a lunatic to block his car. My mother's illness was the excuse, but part of me answered a pull I couldn't name. 3 years had slipped by. He was still the golden heir, only calmer, more formidable. I'd spent those years beside him, watching dynastic feuds up close. A kept woman's smartest move is to quit while she's ahead and stay clear of the crossfire. The weapons of old money aren't something a nobody like me can deflect. Why destroy the last scrap of dignity, the last kind memory? Besides, I could never watch him marry someone else and feel nothing. I couldn't bear to birth a child only to hand it over to him and his future Hawthorne. "I'm sorry. I can't." During the days I spent with Adrian, waiting had become routine. Because I'd had something to wait for, the hours hadn't felt heavy. One glimpse of him and every minute felt worthwhile. This time, though, 2 silent months stretched like 2 silent years. One afternoon, nausea hit me while I was lunching with coworkers, and my period still hadn't come. My heart lurched. I took the rest of the day off and sped to the clinic. The results came back fast. I was pregnant. I had once fantasized that a baby might tether Adrian to me, but he'd never left the door open. Every single time, he'd been meticulous about protection. I treasured every remaining day with him. If he didn't broach the subject, I dared not. On overseas trips, no matter how lost we got in the moment, he never skipped the condom. Before he left Monterey, we'd taken a few spontaneous getaways and, on those hotel nights, skipped the rubber. Had he done it on purpose? I wavered over whether to keep the baby. Adrian disliked children. 2 years earlier, his father had suffered a stroke. Headlines swarmed with rumors that countless illegitimate sons and daughters were scrambling for a share of the fortune. Within 2 months, a dozen unborn nephews and nieces had materialized on paper. As the eldest son and heir, Adrian became the media's favorite target. Single and childless, those were the chinks in his armor. I agonized for weeks. One night, after he tore my nightgown and drove into me with savage need, I swallowed a moan and ventured, "Why don't we have a baby?" He pulled out mid-thrust and walked away. For the next 2 months he stayed away. I followed the news. He was busy crushing the family revolt. When his father stabilized and the share price leveled, he remembered me. We picked up where we'd left off, except I never again uttered the word child. Victoria barged in reeking of hard liquor. The fumes turned my stomach. "Miss Sterling, you're slicker than I thought, actually pregnant with Adrian's baby. Sign this. Once the child is born, I raise it. Consider this the payment we agreed on." She shoved both a contract and a $10 million check at me. I pushed them back. "A baby isn't merchandise, and I never accepted your terms." Back in the apartment, I emptied every box of jewelry and spread it on the bed. Monterey was no longer safe. I had to find somewhere secure to give birth. Cash was the only shield for the child and me. Among the pieces lay the fox motif necklace he'd outbid everyone for, because I'd once murmured, "That little fox looks so alive." The entire haul totaled well over 10 million. To unload it fast, I contacted Adrian's closest friend, Connor. The day I'd said I wanted to see snow, he'd rented the whole alpine resort and taught me to ski himself. Connor had been the fixer. He ran an old-world jewelry shop. That afternoon the showroom was empty and the private door ajar. His phone lay on the tea table, video call still running, and I heard Adrian's voice. "Connor, I saw Victoria, still explosive, grilling me about what you rigged in the Monterey project." "Don't worry, my lips are sealed." "Yeah, Victoria's restless, and the Lang faction's making noise. I'm stuck here a while. Uninvited guests might drop in on her, keep an eye out." "Relax, I've got someone watching daily." "You said you're killing the engagement with Victoria soon, decided?" "Almost. Should be final in a day or two." "Then why not tell Maya first?" "If she panics and terminates." Adrian paused. In that flat, calm tone he answered, "Let her choose. I won't force her." He sounded utterly sure, as though the outcome were already in his pocket. He knew Maya would carry the baby to term. The love in her eyes was impossible to hide. At the start, a simple kiss had flooded her cheeks crimson. She'd squeeze her eyes shut, too shy to look at him. Later, when he'd shown up drunk one night, she'd pressed her fingertip to his chest and whispered, thinking him unconscious, "I love you so much, Adrian." She'd laughed softly, then brushed her lips over his, no heavier than a dragonfly's wing, yet the ripples had rocked him more than any pill his therapist prescribed. For the first time, he felt alive. He had been born into a viper's nest of wealth and power, the firstborn son, raised on schemes and betrayal. Even his own mother had traded him for shares. He had inherited his father's shrewdness and his gift for reading people, yet he could never be as cold-blooded. So he suffered, wrestled, felt helpless, despaired. Because he was unnaturally bright, expectations had been piled on him since childhood. Raised by the playbook reserved for heirs, he mastered 8 languages. Finance and politics were simply the air he breathed. He had watched countless women pass through his father's life. His mother once said that if his father hadn't been so frivolous, they might not have ended up in a scorched earth divorce. He had never felt the slightest interest, or trust, in women. When his father ordered him to marry into the Lang family, he did the mental math for 60 seconds, then nodded. Until that year he met Maya, the girl who had charged at him with no regard for her own life, desperate to save her dying mother. For the first time he felt curiosity about a woman. Agreeing to keep her was half impulse, half a vague refusal to let that innocent face beg another man. His therapist hinted that Maya might cure the illness gnawing at his mind. Over the 3 years he didn't summon her often. Yet whenever deals soured or moods blackened, one look at her drained the poison from his day. She seemed to misunderstand. Each time he arrived she would swap cozy loungewear for a silky negligee in the space of a heartbeat. He never told her to stop. She did look stunning. He never said it aloud, but he loved the sight. A well-trained kept woman ought to know her place and harbor no delusions. Yet her unfeigned affection didn't irritate him. For the first time someone loved him without agenda. To be adored, relied on, needed, it was a drug. Still, while he recognized her love, he couldn't tell whether he retained the capacity to love in return. He had never built true intimacy with anyone. Years of medication had flattened every color to gray. That night she said the 3 years were up, she was leaving. The word leaving alone made his heart stutter, his limbs lock, his lungs forget how to draw air. He felt seconds from suffocation. He forced himself upright, staggered to the kitchen for water, and found the once overloaded fridge hollow and bare. In that instant he knew, he couldn't live without her. He had no idea how to make her stay. Her status would never pass family scrutiny. The Monterey assignment should have taken 2 days. Instead he took his first vacation in years. He scoured their chats, she had never mentioned Monterey. One call and he could map her every move. One text and, knowing her, dinner would be easy. He did neither. He understood he was at war with himself. Since the age of 8 he had purged useless emotions and futile pride. Now they roared back. He clawed through memory and recalled her saying she loved the hush of old bookstores. Would she wander Monterey's shops? He searched every bookstore up and down the coast. Even if she had come, the odds of stepping into the same one were microscopic. Yet at the 7th store he collided with her. Fate, he thought. If heaven insisted, he would indulge himself just this once. But defying the family for her sake would be anything but simple. 15. Autumn comes early to Monterey. A cool breeze twirled a single leaf against the window. I watched it dance, then lowered my eyes to my nearly 4-month bump and kept crocheting a pair of baby booties. I deliberately avoided domestic headlines, refused to ask about Adrian. All my anticipation was wrapped in the new life kicking inside me. Victoria showed up once more. The once untouchable heiress looked haggard, almost pleading. I've called off the engagement with Adrian, but Hawthorne will never let him marry you. Let's deal. Arrange a meeting for me, my father will adopt you as his goddaughter. With that title Hawthorne might accept you. I shook my head slowly. I don't need it. I didn't need the title of Lang's honorary daughter. I didn't need the title of Hawthorne daughter-in-law either. These weeks I'd finally understood, if Adrian said he could never give me a marriage certificate, then he never could. But I already regretted my answer that day. He had never planned to make me the other woman in some arranged alliance. He simply couldn't beat his family, couldn't give me a name. As long as no other woman existed, I would stay beside him, even without the paper. The avatar that had been silent for ages lit up. Adrian asked where I was right then. At last I could reply, home. Waiting for you. 16. Another year rolled round, spring yielded to autumn again. Time to fly home once more, and as usual I asked Rachel to watch the yard. Cradling my daughter, Rachel teased, goodness, she's not even one. A 10-hour flight, why put the poor thing through that? Why don't you two go and leave the baby to play with me for a few days? I laughed. Rachel, if you like kids so much, go make one with your husband. Rachel hugged the baby tighter but shook her head. Huge difference between playing with a niece and pushing one out myself, hard pass. Adrian heaved the suitcase into the trunk, strode over, lifted our daughter into her car seat, then opened my door. I waved to Rachel. Try not to miss her too much, we'll be back after New Year's. A day of planes and airports later we reached the black iron gates of the Hawthorne estate. The housekeeper and a troop of nannies were already waiting. Young master, Maya, you must be exhausted. She smiled and signaled the nannies to take the baby. Adrian handed them our daughter's favorite toy, reluctant to let go. She likes a quiet fairy tale before sleep, keep your voice low. When she wakes she'll play alone, don't crowd her. The housekeeper cut in, master, the old master and madam are waiting in the drawing room. I'll take the little miss inside. The automatic gates shut, the car carrying our daughter disappeared up the drive. Come on, I tugged Adrian's sleeve. The road was empty, there was nothing left to stare at. Ellis, we agreed, 2 days at the estate, no more. 3 years later I gave birth to a son. We still returned twice a year. Each time, after delivering daughter and son to the Hawthorne mansion, Adrian wore a stricken, unwilling look. I laced my fingers through his and whispered, the house we lived in for those 3 years is ready. How about a quiet week, just us? Light flared in Adrian's eyes. The instant we stepped inside, familiar scents wrapped around us. The man turned predator, urgent and ravenous. Bent forward, I whimpered against his mouth, which only spurred him harder. His stamina was absurd, I begged for mercy over and over. I can't, anymore. Adrian chuckled, pupils darkening. Relax, wife. The place where I had once been a kept woman for 3 long years, had at last become our home. The marriage license Adrian secretly took me to claim no longer mattered. The one I loved was already beside me. The end. Thank you for listening to today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share it with friends. We look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more wonderful stories. See you next time.